we're fortunate to be joined by the presenters that have spoken so far today, as well as some of the faculty in the School of Digital Media. And so what we've decided this will be is sort of an open session. Does anyone have a question that they would like to kick things off with? Yes. And I'm going to give you the mic so you can speak into it.
This is for the faculty. How does it feel seeing one of your students up here with you now, or just seeing other students succeed in their careers, knowing that you did your job?
All right, I'm going to take that one. Was talking about this with Lauren earlier. I remember a phone conversation that I had as I was driving to Milwaukee for a freelance gig in between semesters, and I'm talking to this very eager high school student, and she wanted to know everything about our program. And I must have done a halfway decent sales job because she did decide to come here. And while I wasn't I'm involved in internships now. I'm the internship coordinator now, but I wasn't back then. But to see, how this all comes full circle. I mean, she was the vice president of MCA. No one mentioned that, actually. So she was basically, where's Natalie? She's basically doing the exact same, Natalie's doing the same thing as vice president that Lauren did before. So yeah, it's incredibly gratifying. It's why we're here, right? Students come here at 18 or 19, they don't necessarily know who they are, what they want to do. They have a general idea, and then at 22, 23, seeing them leave and then seeing them come back in early careers is why we do what we do.
I'm gonna add to that. I knew Lauren was going to be successful, right? I mean, there's just some students that you just immediately know that they're gonna do everything they can to be successful and do things outside of class, and Lauren and I worked on a 36-hour film challenge, and I also learned a lot about Lauren as a person, and she just lights up a room. She's positive. She loves what she does. She shows that. And you know what? When employers see that, and when, even in the interview, they know that matters. So.
But it's no joke when Lauren said that she was giving Nick a rather difficult time trying to coordinate an internship with and for her. And I bring that up because as I listened to Lauren's presentation, I think that she's made a lot of decisions, and I think we all heard that those were difficult decisions to make. It's easy to look back at them now and go, oh, that worked out great and that worked out great, but she didn't have a crystal ball when she was making those decisions, and so it seems to me that she went with where her heart was and where her gut was and where she thought she was going to be able to fulfill her hopes and dreams and passions. As faculty, we want to facilitate your learning and your experience, but it is your learning and it is your experience. And so I think that's something that Lauren, and even though it was maybe a little bit frustrating to try to support her through that, she did stick to her guns, and that's to her credit. And it worked out. And she just got hit with the crutch, but it's okay. You didn't see that.
One on camera.
Next question.
This question is mainly directed towards Sankit. Did I say your name correctly? Okay. So you worked on both God of War as well as some games at Blue Point, like Shadow of the Colossus and the Demon Souls remake. What was your, references like versus on those games for like a new game where you have brand new, fresh concepts versus a remake where you have pre-existing game and old concept? Do you have new concepts to work with, or do you kind of work with the old game?
So I just want to start by saying that at Blue Point I started recently, and I was just mentioning the games they worked on. So I started last year in 2022 in September, so I didn't work on those games. It was just a quick intro about what Blue Point does. But the difference is when you make a remake, you need to stay true to at least in terms of art, you need to stay true to what the fans recognize, and making something similar, so they are not heavily investing in original designs. And it's a studio that just remakes games whatever they think are fun. So I think that's a really it shows their command on they can just work on whatever they want to and how good of a studio they are. But that's not to say that God of War, when they did the new one, Ragnarok, it's not like you can just use all the old assets and it seems like a remake, but it's kind of different. So yeah, you can compare it that way, but that's the main difference. Yeah.
I'm going to ask a question of Lauren because we were talking about this at lunch a little bit, and she mentioned she didn't get to this in her presentation. As a freelancer, of course, that opens up a whole nother set of things. Some of you are asking about, from a business perspective, how that works. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about what you've done to kind of be your own employer.
Yeah, sure. So like I said, I have not quite fully leaned into the full freelancing thing that my very business-oriented father would prefer me to lean into. But, tax season is here. It's alive and well. One of my main things that I focused on, at least on the business side of things, was for every invoice that came in, it was untaxed. And so every invoice that came in, I set 25% of it aside into a separate savings account, just so that when tax season came around, I hadn't spent money I didn't have. Basically. And so, you have to lean in, learn about the world of write-offs and business expenses and a lot of equipment that was purchased that can then be written off, but at the same time, that's not your saving grace. Don't buy a bunch of camera gear just to write it off. This coming year, it won't be the same, but I would say just kind of having a grip on how much you're bringing in and how much of that is actually needed and usable. I think that a lot of times there was this eager joy when I'd see the number on an invoice, and I was like, oh my gosh, look at all this money. And then I'd put a large chunk of it into this other savings account and be like, oh, there's not as much money to work with. And so it did help though, because, tax season came around, I had some gear to write off, and I ended up feeling like I made money again because I had put a little bit more than I needed into this tax account. And it's kind of the boring side of things. I had to download all these programs to track all of my purchases and see how much money I spend that I shouldn't be spending, and following that and tracking that, and kind of understanding that there's more to budget and more to learn about than just do this thing and make this money.
All right. So I got a question for Sanket. I guess, so you talked a bit about working with outsourcing in your presentation, and I'm kind of curious, as students, how much is this something that we should kind of be gearing ourselves towards, and if this is something that we should be thinking about, what kind of skills should we work on building up for this kind of position? So,
Yeah, great question. You need to first understand the purpose of outsourcing is to reduce some of the workload from the bigger studios. So if you really want to work at a bigger studio, if that's your aim, then you can try to focus on a department like that. And it's really good for people if you're really struggling to create art, but you still have that artistic eye, and you can accurately pinpoint how to elevate an asset, and you're able to decipher what the art style is and what can improve that prop that you send out. Then that's a good department for you to be in, where you don't have to learn all the technical aspect of creating an asset, but you're able to give feedback and bring all those other assets that you send out to the same level. So yeah, that's a good department to look to if you want to work for a big studio, because if it's a smaller studio, they're probably not going to outsource a lot of stuff.
I think if I can, to add to that, one of the things that Sanket's talking about there. Hi. Is this idea that everything that you build as an artist doesn't have to be a hero asset? You go through a game and how many props do you see? You know, there's tables, there's chairs, there's things. All these things get made, and when he's talking about outsourcing stuff, that's where the outsource world exists. The people that are in the studio are going to make all the cool stuff. You're going to get all the leftovers. That's usually how that works out. But we have to have all that stuff to make a level actually functional. So if you're not sure where you might go and you don't think that you have the moxie to do some amazing, great, cool, super awesome hero asset, people still need tables, chairs, salt shakers, televisions, all those types of things. And if you can match a studio style and still put that stuff out, that's going to get you looked at. And they're going to say, oh, hey, this person made a really good microwave. It sounds mundane and stupid, but they're in levels all over the place. If you look up Decagon Studios on ArtStation, they do asset packs, and that's like pro artists that make amazing stuff that populates games. And that whole studio, that's like their whole specialty. They don't produce like the main things that like a Santa Monica would crank out, but they produce all the side stuff that makes a level to level. And those guys are absolute monsters. They are complete pros. They have lots of tutorials out there, again, on ArtStation for free. You don't pay for them. The ArtStation Learning thing is free for everyone still. And they have a lot of good content out there. So that's really, I think, what makes that work is to not think, oh, if it isn't the big thing, I'm not getting it. No, totally. Drill down on that, and you will get the chance to do the big hero assets later on. So.
I'm going to get to you next. I want to ask a question for Fuad. First of all the things you could program, how rewarding, because you talked about your career, arc and where some of your interests were starting as a child, and now you find yourself doing programming of advertising with content. So I guess I'm curious about, because you could be programming anything. So are you happy that this is kind of where you're at? There's that correlation. That's A. And then B, do you have any insight to how Netflix is approaching, ads in their content and that part of their delivery model?
Well, to answer your first question, it's actually quite rewarding. And what I like the most is when I do batch work and try to solve a large quantity of work using a script, something that would have taken a long time. So I feel like I've done something meaningful. I'm like, look at all this money and time that I saved. I can, finish my work and maybe relax a little bit. For the Netflix specifically, I don't have any information, unfortunately, on that, but that's something I should probably look up and learn about myself.
So your company didn't get that business then yet, huh?
No, unfortunately, not yet.
So this first question is for Lauren. So you talked about how you were constantly getting rejections and also like how during like your career you were honestly having anxiety and issues. I was just wondering like how you honestly kept yourself motivated and like kept on going throughout it, even though there were moments where you feel like you were just utterly difficult situations.
I would say probably the people in the front row right here were very helpful. I had a lot of family input on kind of getting through that. I have kind of struggled throughout the time of being a creative, just kind of with the feelings of like fraud, inadequacy, just kind of like not feeling like I have the skill set or the talent to be where I am, or maybe that I got lucky to be where I am. And so I've been very grateful to be surrounded by people who, even though I don't listen to them, constantly tell me otherwise. And so I don't listen to them. I only recently accepted like that I was a professional photographer, even though I was being paid a salaried job for 3 years to do that. And so I think that it's not easy. And I think the rejections in the pandemic made it even harder. I was very isolated on my own. I didn't have any of the outlets that I used to have. So I would just say like FaceTime was probably one of my biggest things. And just communicating with the people who know me and love me and believe in me more than usually I believed in myself was one of the most helpful things, I would say, just because having that support system is incredibly important. Even now that I'm confident in my role and where I am, having that support system when things get frustrating or when I'm just absolutely exhausted. I mean, I got back from camp Wednesday night. This presentation was not done. And I requested that someone wake me up in time that I could work on it yesterday because I knew that I didn't want to set an alarm because I had gotten 3 hours of sleep the night before. So I think just truly like finding your people. My people don't live by me anymore. And so finding your people, whether it be your family, whether it be your chosen family, whether it be whoever, finding people that support you and believe in you and believe in your talents, and also just like give you the chance to like be yourself and do what you do creatively.
Hi, good afternoon. So this question can go to anyone. So I'm trying to figure out how to word this. How far do you think someone can go into industry or industries with no bachelor or no associates? Because I'm currently going for an associate's technically. And how far do you think I could go with just that? Thank you.
I mean, personally, from my experience, at least in the sports world, incredibly far. I didn't have the personal motivation to learn how to do things on my own. I needed to pay someone to teach me. But I am surrounded by people who, I mean, my co-videographer, when I worked for the women's professional team in Kansas City, picked up a camera in COVID and fell in love with it. And coming out of COVID, had insane talent. Obviously, there were a lot of like little things that being in a classroom might teach you that he hadn't gotten to. But at the same time, you learn those things through experience. You learn those things through doing. I feel like creatively, experience and hands-on things is what's going to get you farther than anything else. And so as long as you can get yourself in those opportunities and you have the personal motivation, then, you know, it is what it is. I don't think anyone I ever interviewed with talked about school or talked about graduation or my GPA or my degree. It was just, does your reel show that you are capable of doing this work? And if you are, sign you up. Like, so I needed it, but I don't think that everyone needs it. And if you give yourself the experience and the reel and can show that you can work through it, that's my viewpoint on that.
Hi, if I may, yeah. Yeah, a little bit on the technical side of things. I hope I'm not too loud. My name is Mohammed Abushark. I'm the Software Engineering Program Chair. It's nice to see all of you. Just a little bit to kind of add. Some numbers tell us a little bit about the dependence of employers on bachelors and associates. There are definitely what Lauren talked about. If you have that incredible skill, the 1% skill, and you can show it, definitely, yeah, there is a way or a path to get to that place. But two questions. First, how do you get to that level of skill? And also the structure that education offers. Data tells us that nothing can beat university or traditional degrees for until now. And I'm in a world where software, you know, if there's options to teach TV and, you know, media production now, in software 20 years ago, there were options that are totally free, totally open, very flexible, and you're competing with companies like Google, the best software company in the world, if you will. So they're offering too. What did Google offer? They offered a 6-month degree. They're now trying to compete with the universities. They still didn't dare offer a bachelor's degree. Why is that? Are they afraid of universities? I wouldn't think so. The reason is the numbers tell them that structure that the university offers, that promise, the opportunity of networking, the opportunity of teamwork, the opportunity of growth for students is unparalleled with the university setup. So 73%, some numbers to support that, 73% of Coursera courses never get completed, and that is the alternative, a free course or kind of thing. Another thing is a concept you might hear about and read about online, something called the glass ceiling. Now the glass ceiling may be at Google, at Microsoft, maybe Tesla, maybe it doesn't exist. However, 85% to 90% of employers in the United States, it's a realistic phenomenon. This will hinder your promotion. Maybe right now, maybe I'll get a job. But after a while, people will say, oh, where's your degree? Where's your structured learning? Where is all of that? So as a professor, I know my position is clear. But, you know, I hope that offered some data to support that.
I agree to that as well. Mostly it's like for the DAGD programs and for the DAGD fields that we have, yes, your portfolio, your demo reels are going to speak towards the skill and ability you're going to bring to the table, but your university degree tells me that you're matured, you've adulted, you know how to work in groups, you know how to communicate, you know teamwork, you know all of these other things. You know, that's what your degree is speaking to me about.
And I could add just one thing to that. As someone who has chaired close to 30 searches, credentials, and this is higher ed, so that probably goes to follow, but credentials are the first thing that looks at if you're trying to get past human resources. So that's not true of every industry in every place in every way, but I can tell you in a lot of places that credential is seen as critical.
Thank you. I hope this isn't too Ferris specific, but this goes to the faculty here. The more I look at it and the more finished it is, the building outside for the new Digital Media Center, I was wondering how this would affect your teaching styles, the opportunities you would like to take advantage of in the new building, and how this will affect the students in the future.
I don't mind starting as someone who's been working on this project for a long time now. This is the first time that we will have dedicated learning space that was structured by us from the beginning. So the faculty have had input in terms of what these spaces are going to look like, down to how the lighting works, how the furniture is laid out, what other technology we need in there. So purpose-built, for what the instruction that we're doing. Creating communities, again, our programs, are in the same school, but there's not as much interaction ultimately as I think we see potential for, and we think that's going to be facilitated by being on the same floor, in the same building, in adjacent classrooms. And finally, one of the things as faculty, and that I'm personally very excited for, our offices for too long have been too far away from where the learning is, okay? So to know that you guys could come out of a lab with a question and go around the corner and be in the faculty office space and perhaps find one of us, like for an instantaneous kind of gratification thing, as opposed to, being very far removed from that space. So I think it's going to have significant impact. I also think that, I don't want to say this definitively, but we're going to have so much new, what are we talking, like 78 new computers on the third floor of Bishop Hall. So that'll be okay too.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
So I wanted to ask the presenters, how in your field and your career, how did you gain interest in it, and how did you, if you ever experienced it, get over the fear of starting?
I guess I can take this one. I got into animation because I didn't get into the film program. And the other reason was because, as a friend who worked in film said, the animators are all a bunch of geeks, and we don't get out too much, so we enjoy working in our little spaces. And I just kind of took it from there. I thought that animation and game design was a good technical field, so I had a kind of fear of going into the arts because I felt that it wasn't practical enough. So I was very impressed by the fact that animation and game design had a technical aspect. We were working with software, we're learning about coding, etc., which are skills which are applicable in many areas. So that's how I got into it, and that's what really attracted me. And I'm glad I did.
For me, I started off as a computer engineer, and it was very apparent because the friends I hung out with, I could clearly see the passion in their eyes. They used to huddle together after classes and code together, and I clearly didn't feel the same passion that they did. So it was a big sign for me. I'm sorry. But also, I played a lot of video games growing up, and I tended to gravitate towards creating unique characters. I spent like hours, I'm pretty sure a lot of people do that. Even just a whole day when you start a new game, I would just spend like half a day just creating my character, and it has its own backstory and all that good stuff. And then like another half day just to name him. So that's how I was like, these were all like things that were pointing me into this certain direction that, hey, maybe I really like making characters and I should really look into that.
For next year, I'm interested in your friends who huddled up and went coding together.
For sure. I think, want to go? Yeah. You want to?
No, I just want to add something about gaming. And gaming teaches you to always try again and again, and it's okay. So if you want to get into a field, just keep trying. It doesn't matter. And be okay with being criticized. If you can accept the criticism and learn from it, I mean, that's the recipe to succeeding in that field.
I'd say for me, it started very early. I was surrounded by cameras growing up. My aunt owns a production company in Lansing. And so I was surrounded by that world. And I remember a teacher in high school gave this presentation, and it was like, if you could only do one thing for the rest of your life, what would it be? And I was like, watch movies. And immediately I was like, man, you are lazy. And then I realized that it had more to do with the creation of them and the storytelling and all of that. And so I immediately knew like I was looking for schools that offered that kind of program. As for your question about fear, sports-wise, there was definitely fear. I had never done it. I grew up playing soccer my entire life and had never documented it outside of like high school yearbook. And if you see those photos, they're tragic. I don't know why they were put in the yearbook. I thought they were really good. But I think there was a lot of fear because all I had done was food. And I was like, I want to document sports. And food doesn't move. And so it was one of those things where it was terrifying to leave, again, the security of a full-time job that I had grown in and done well in for something that I knew would treat me better in the long run with just like joy and happiness and creativity, but also was not going to lend any sort of security to me.
Okay, I don't know, am I too loud, anything? Good? All right. So this, I guess, can go to everyone too. I was actually talking to Marty a little bit ago, and he just said something that really stuck up to me. So I just have a question. What are like the pros and cons of doing a lot of things really well and being extraordinary and amazing in one specific thing?
So it's easy. It's an easy answer to this one is how many jobs can you do in the real world? Like you have 24 hours in a day. Everybody has 24 hours in a day. And one job requires that you spend 8 hours a day in that, right? How many hours can you spend on other jobs, right? And each different job that we find in the industry is asking you for a specific skill set. So mastery in one stream and one kind of thing only, right? So, and that means they're expecting 40 hours of work a week to go into that very specific thing. You may be interested in other different things that you're good at. Like, for example, you could be a ventriloquist. You could be, an audio engineer. I don't know. You could be a comedian, stand-up, an entertainment kind of a guy in your workplace. All of these are pluses that the company is not paying for, but they got a bonus out of you, right? So they're going to be appreciative of that fact, definitely. But the pay you are going to receive is for that one skill set. So master that. Focus on that, and you have a huge, a very long life ahead of you that you can find other hobbies and also demonstrate them.
I guess I'd offer a counterpoint to that. So I think you need to be a little bit good at a lot of things and then specialize in one thing. And I think that that's what our programs here do pretty well. It immerses you in a lot of different things, maybe some things you're not particularly interested in. Just speaking from the TDMP side of it, I've had students come in and say, I'm a film person. I have zero interest in sports. I'll never do sports. By the time they graduate, they're interning at a sports place and they absolutely love it. So I would say, particularly when you're young, don't be too sure about what you think you're going to do and what you think you're really good at, because you might change your mind and maybe you're not, you don't have the aptitude for it that you thought you did. That's hopefully what 4 years of school shows you, is not just what you're good at, but what you're not good at or don't really have any interest in. So that would be one thing. And another thing too with over-specializing, I mean, look at the world. Jobs get automated out of existence. Jobs no longer become relevant. So having a broad base, but then also an area of specialization. So I guess I'm saying both and, right? I think is the way to go, because you're going to change careers, not just change places of work, but change the work you do over the course of a hopefully long life and career.
Just to add to that, what you should aim for is just be well-rounded, and then maybe be extra, strong in one thing.
Yeah, I would say I agree. I would also say that I would never have been hired by U.S. Soccer if I had only done one thing well. U.S. Soccer is not looking for an editor. U.S. Soccer is not really looking for a shooter. In at least the youth environment, like I said, I had to be a good photographer. I had to be a good filmer. I had to be a good editor. I had to be a good producer. I had to be able to do all of those things because, one, they don't have the money to pay other people, and two, you are expected to control the narrative of that team. And so I would say that through my time at Ferris and through my time at Hy-Vee, there were always things that I gravitated towards at different times, but I needed to continually be good at all of those things to be able to be marketable and applicable to some of the positions that I wanted to be in. On the flip side of that, can't animate, can't do it, don't understand After Effects, don't understand anything about it, but I have enough other applicable skills that they can get over that to kind of hire me, and then they can have someone else create the animated lower third or something.
I think one of the important things about having a broad education like we give it here at Ferris State is that it prepares you for changes. When I was in graduate school, I was told about the field of graphic design, which I don't know if any of you remember this, maybe the older people here do. Graphic design, I'm old too, it's okay, it's all right. In the 1980s, graphic design used to be the top of the arts, $50 an hour. And then came computers and graphic design went down to $5 an hour. It was just a huge crash. And the really good graphic designers, the ones who really understood art, they were able to move into web design. But the others had to go somewhere else. So it's very important that we have that background, that well-rounded education, because you may get into something now, it may be hot for the next 5 years, and then comes, who knows, GPT chat, right? And if you have that well-rounded background, you'll be able to pivot. But if you don't, it might be harder. So that's why I think our degree is very worthwhile, and it's worthwhile that students at our school learn about all aspects, art, technology, and so forth.
This is a question from Davis, who's on the camera switcher, actually. It's for Lauren. He said, you said you had a practical interview, so do you think that TDMP practical exams prepared you for these interviews?
Answer honestly, Lauren, we insist.
I answered something similar to this after my presentation. I would say yes and no. My practical interview was not timed in the sense that TDMP was. Obviously, I had a deadline that they wanted to see this video by, but it wasn't like, go into this room and edit this thing and show that you know these skills. But I would say, generally speaking, although a lot of the concepts and applications of what we were learning in TDMP during school wasn't my forte, I use every single thing that I've learned, and I did so in school. I took everything and applied it to what I was passionate about. And so I made it through with like what was being asked of me in TDMP, but I was also doing stuff outside that I felt more passionate about, and then in turn made my work better, because when you care about it, you're going to do better. Practical interview-wise, they're stressful, but they're necessary. So I will just say, like, deadlines are deadlines, and even senior sequence deadlines are a lot more time than I've ever been given in sports to edit a video. So, you know.
Wait, what's that? What'd you say, Lauren?
Yeah, that's the basis of it.
And I'll just, I want to kind of, Mohammed provided a really good response on this question about higher ed and this question about application, and that was the same thing that Lauren just said. And I want to point out that, you know, remember what underpins an education here at Ferris State University, a bachelor's degree here at Ferris State University, is a lot of applied learning. And this is why we talked about the new building and all the tools and all the equipment in there. That is so that you guys can apply what you're learning to practical things. So you do have a demo reel or a portfolio when you're done. And you do have all these things because you've been actively engaged in your learning.
So even though I'm an adult, I have been constantly told by others that I have not yet entered the adult world because I'm still in college. So my question to you guys is, what's the hardest lesson you've learned from transferring to college into your careers?
I would say, no. I would say that probably a big thing is time management. I think that in college, especially during senior sequence, it felt like you didn't have enough time in the day to get everything done. But if you're about to go into a full-time job, you have to recognize that, like, your day is gone. You know, you get into the office at 8, you leave at 5, sometimes more. Shoot days are longer. And so time management was probably one of the biggest switches. Just kind of figuring out how to give the time to this job that you want to do well at, you want to grow at, while also giving time to yourself. And I mean, college, at least if you have a meal plan, the meals are made. And like, as an adult, you have to make the meals and shop for the food. And when you work for a grocery store, you have to do it even more. And so it's just one of those things where the balance of time that you have, like, I don't think I realized how much time I had in college and probably how much time I wasted in college. I don't regret it. I mean, it was great. But I remember my semester before senior sequence, I only had classes 2 days a week. I had loads of time. And now, you know, I go into camp and I work 12, 15 hours a day for 14 days in a row, and then I'm done. But I think time management is probably the biggest application.
I would say learning that there's not one way to do things. I tell my students this a lot. When you get out into your first job, no one wants to hear you say, but my professor said to do it this way, right? We are teaching you, hopefully, more than one way, if we're doing our job right of doing things, that there's more than one path to the solution. But ultimately, you're going to be in a professional scenario, and you're going to be expected to produce something. And you'll be relying on, hopefully, everything you learn, not just from us, but from other projects and other things to do that. I think that the second thing I would say is, at some point in your life, you will become someone who others can rely upon. You will become someone that you can rely upon, as opposed to being someone who relies upon others. We're born and we rely on others for everything. And over the course of time, there comes a point. Sometimes it's here, and I see it happen with our students. Sometimes it doesn't happen for a couple years. But becoming someone who pivots from you rely on everyone for everything to I can rely on myself and others can rely on me, that's what I think, that's the class we teach here as far as I'm concerned. Adulting 101, right? So.
I understand that it's not a good mentality like go into the like past stuff and all that, and this is kind of like related to what her question was, but more in a general sense. So like, has there ever been like something where you just had that thought and you're just like, man, if I would have just done this, I kind of would have just been here a lot more sooner than I already am, like at the exact position, not a better position, but the exact position that you're at?
Yeah, it was really discovering what my opportunities were at that time. In India, when I was pursuing my education, I always was fascinated by animation, and Lauren, what you said also reminded me. My parents used to ask me what I wanted to become, and I was also saying the same thing. I want to play video games for the rest of my life. And they kept telling me that's not a job that's going to pay you, right? So reality kicks in eventually, and then the opportunities were not sufficient in India from what I was looking for. And then I started my hunt and then discovered, the other countries around the world had some significant development in this field. And that is why I wanted to learn more about it, learn more and discover, right? But ultimately, from when I was 4 years old, really, this passion towards the entertainment industry never died away. And I wanted to keep it alive in one way or another. I wanted to be connected with this in one way or another. And that, I think, drove me to pursue this every day. Again, the job that you want to be, and I say this to my students as well, the job that you want to be is the job that doesn't wake you up in the morning with an alarm. You wake yourself up. And also you don't feel like you want to go to bed. You want to continue doing this. And you don't see the money, your salary in this job. If you love it, you will just do it. Money feels like it's secondary. And at that's when you can say you're happy doing what you're doing, that you're really in the dream job. You landed that dream job.
I'll just add real quick that sometimes the dream job requires an alarm. Totally agree with that sentiment, but sometimes you really need that alarm.
I want to support all the points and just talk a little bit about giving ourselves the chance. So pulling on a thread from Lucas's question early on, as a student, as a graduate, this is not just it. You can keep growing, you can keep learning, and the way to do that is to give yourself the chance to recognize those patterns in the job market or in how I do things to grow. So on that question, maybe a way to avoid having that situation where, oh, I wish I've done this. If I had a calculated monitoring and thinking about what I do, maybe once every month, once every 6 months, sit with myself, evaluate my skills, evaluate how I do things. This is how the top 1% grow, like the top performance in every field. They calculate, they think about the things they do every day. If we're able to do that and measure that against the patterns in the market, for example, job market or skills, then definitely you will grow and you will not feel a challenge shifting the fields like George talked about, because you're aware, oh, this is what's happening, so I can do it little by little, and I learn little by little. So a little bit about that.
Okay. Well, I think even though this was a shift in our original plan, I think this has worked out really well. And so I'd like to thank our guest speakers who participated, as well as our faculty who participated in the panel. Let's give them a round of applause.